Hey guys, another episode has been cleared for public release. Just barely, but we're cleared. So today we're going to be talking about something that tends to make compliance people suddenly very interested in their coffee. Because everybody says it's not a system problem, right up until something goes wrong. Because eventually, when things go wrong, when a file doesn't hold up or when questions can't be answered, the conversation always goes in the same direction. What happened? Who did this? Why wasn't it done right? And just like that, everybody's looking for a person to blame. But here's the problem with that. Most of the time, the person didn't fail. The system failed. And worse than that, the system was built in a way that made failure inevitable.
This broadcast has been cleared for public release, but just barely.
Broadcasting from deep inside the Federal Acquisition Labyrinth, this is the GovCon Show. This show is for acquisition pros, wannabe pros, and procurement insiders who need a place to unpack the chaos. We speak fluent contracting and sarcasm. No clearance required. This is the GovCon Show. And away we go!
Welcome back to the GovCon Show. This show is therapy for the overworked, the overregulated, and underappreciated. It's not a lecture, it's not a webinar, and it's definitely not the NPR of government contracting. This is a show where contracting professionals say the quiet part out loud. We break down the reality behind federal contracting, the pressure, the responsibility, the decisions that actually matter, and the absurdity that comes with all of it. So from bad scopes of work and rogue FAR clauses, all the way to CPSR panic attacks and procurement files that don't tell the story, nothing is off limits. Okay, in our last episode, we talked about how your system actually gets exposed. Not all at once, not dramatically, but one file, one question, one moment where everything starts to unravel. Today, we're taking the next step because once that unraveling starts, the next question is always, well, who messed this up? And that question, that's where most companies go wrong. Now, tell me the truth. I bet you've seen this. You've probably even been a part of it. A file gets flagged, something doesn't hold up, and immediately the team starts tracing it back. Who was the admin on this subcontract? Who approved this? Who wrote the sole source justification? Now we're not solving a problem, we're starting an investigation, which always goes well. Because that feels productive. It feels like control. It feels like accountability. But it's usually wrong. And here's the uncomfortable truth. Most weak files are not created by bad people or bad employees. They're created by good people who are working inside weak systems. People who are trying to move fast, trying to meet the deadlines, trying to balance competing priorities, and trying to keep things moving. And in that environment, clarity gets sacrificed. Consistency gets sacrificed. Documentation gets sacrificed. Not because people don't care, but because the system rewards speed, not defensibility. And it's at this point that the system starts to tell on itself. Every system, whether you admit it or not, is training your people on how to behave. If your system says get it done quickly, guess what? Your people are really good at that. They're really good at getting it done quickly. And guess what happens? They optimize for speed. If your environment says don't slow things down, well, guess what? People stop asking questions. And if your environment is one that preaches, well, we'll clean it up later, it never gets cleaned up. So when you look at a weak file and think, why would somebody do this? The better question to ask is, why does our system allow this to happen consistently? Now, the trap that a lot of companies fall into, experience. You've got people who've been doing this for years. They know the processes. They understand the environment. They have seen it all. And because of that, you trust them. And that trust slowly turns into a blind spot or maybe even a dependency. And dependencies are fine right up until the person they depend on is out, gone, overloaded, or finally stops answering emails after 6:30 p.m. Because nobody's really checking anymore. You stop requiring clarity because you assume it is there. You stop verifying logic because you assume it makes sense. You stop pushing for documentation because you believe everybody knows what they're doing. And they do. Oh, trust me, they do. But knowing what to do and proving what was done are not the same thing. And that is where your systems quietly break. They become dependent on specific people, not documented processes, not consistent logic, but people. The person who knows how we do things, the person who handles this complex stuff, the person who can explain it if anyone asks. And as long as that person is there, everything is fine. Until they're not there. Or worse, until someone asks a question and they're not there to answer it. Let's connect this back to what we talked about in the last episode. One file gets pulled, one question gets asked, and now the person who handled it is expected to explain it. But here's the problem. They're not sitting in the room. They're not there when the file gets reviewed. All it's there is the file. And if the system didn't force them to capture the logic, it's gone. Now you're relying on memory, and memory doesn't audit well. It barely survives a meeting. Now, this is where companies throw money at the wrong solution. Training. Let's train the team. Let's remind them what good looks like. Let's reinforce the process. And look, training matters, but here's the problem. Training helps, but training does not override a system that rewards the wrong behavior. If your system says move fast, then people move fast. If your system is quietly screaming, don't slow things down, then people skip steps. And if your system prefers to fix it later, it doesn't get fixed. No amount of training overrides that culture. So let's flip this. A strong system doesn't rely on perfect people. It enforces clarity. It forces consistency. It forces decisions to be captured in a way that stands on its own. It doesn't ask people to remember to do it right. It makes it hard to do it wrong. And that's the difference. So if you want to talk about accountability, then let's talk about it in the right way. Stop asking who messed it up and start asking, why did our system allow this to happen? Because if multiple people produce the same weak outcome, it's not a people problem. It's a system design problem. Now, this is where most companies hesitate, right? Because that's a hard pill to swallow. It's always easier to believe that you've got a few people issues than it is to admit that your system needs to be completely reworked. And along those lines, that's exactly why I built the CPSR readiness diagnostic tool. It helps surface where that inconsistency is actually coming from, because once you see that clearly, the conversation changes pretty quickly. Because if your system is producing inconsistent results, you need to see that now and not when someone else points it out. All right, so let me leave you with this. Your people are not your biggest risk. Your system is. Because your system determines how decisions get made, how they get documented, and whether they hold up when somebody looks. And if your system is weak, even your best people will produce weak results. So go ahead, swallow the pill, fix your system issues. This is the GovCon Show, where government contracting professionals stop pretending and start seeing what's really there. Your people aren't the problem. But if your system is built wrong, they don't stand a chance. So now the question is simple. What are you going to do about it? If your system is relying on people instead of structure, if you're seeing inconsistency across files, or if you're not sure it would hold up during a real scrutiny, you need to fix it. Go to govconadvisorygroup.com, because that's where the systems get rebuilt. We're not patching them, or we're not there to explain them. We're helping you build them. Or if your team needs to understand what good actually looks like, and if they've been operating on habits instead of structure, then you need to take advantage of our Learn It approach. Go to contractsclassroom.com. Either way, stop blaming people for system failures. That is not accountability, that's avoidance. I'll see you next time in the next episode. And yeah, this episode was truly cleared for public release. Just barely.
If today's episode sounded a little too familiar, that's probably a sign. Until next time, keep your files tight, your logic tighter. Remember, if your compliance approach is built on checking boxes, you're building risk. We'll see you next time on the GovCon Show.
This broadcast has been cleared for public release, but just barely.